What's up, gamers? Hope you're all doing well and ready for today's epic video essay on the first-person exploration game, Gone Home. Gone Home was developed by the Fullbright Company and was first released in 2013. This game has been the subject of some controversy over its genre and even the statement that it's a game at all, with some critics suggesting that it's nothing but a walking sim. Despite the controversy, Gone Home made waves in the world of video games and paved the way for countless other non-traditional and queer games and stories. So, let's get into it. In the game, you are Katie Greenbrier, arriving at your family's new home after spending some time in Europe. When you get there, however, the house is dark and no one's home. The first thing you see is a note on the door from your younger sister Sam that reads, "Don't go looking for me." Now, with the feeling that something terrible has happened, you begin to explore the house to look for some clues as to where the heck everyone is, and slowly you piece together a story. As you explore, you collect pieces of a narrative, and by the end of the game, you finally know what's happened. Set in the year 1995, this is a story about Sam. Through object interactions in the game, we learn that Sam, who feels alienated by her new classmates, has met a girl named Lonnie, who helps her come to the realization that she's a lesbian.
It's weird hanging out with girls. Daniel was around ever since I was little, and other girls? I don't know. But being around Lonnie is like instantly just right. I gave her the grand Psycho House tour and took my revenge on Super Nintendo. And it was like, I don't know, I finally found someone I feel normal around.
The two teenage girls fall in love, but when Sam's parents discover Sam's true feelings for her friend, they reject the notion that Sam is attracted to women completely. Feeling hurt and alone, Sam runs away to be with Lonnie. Alright, so first let's talk about genre and the ways in which Gone Home succeeds as a horror game. The atmosphere. The night that your flight lands, it just so happens to be raining. I mean, come on. Upon entering the house, the lights are off, there's the faint sound of a TV in another room, and there's no one to be found. As the player, you might feel uneasy as you recognize all the usual atmospheric elements of a horror game. It doesn't take long, however, to realize that there are no monsters hiding in the darkness or ghouls in the walls. In fact, everything is pretty ordinary. This doesn't disqualify it from being a horror game, however. It's not that there's nothing to fear. Instead, the uncanniness of the house makes it the thing to fear. Here we can look to Freud's essay on the uncanny for some help. In this essay, Freud states that the uncanny is in reality nothing new or alien, but something which is familiar and old established in the mind, and which has become alienated from it only through the process of repression. In Gone Home, the house fulfills these criteria. This dark and empty house is where your family lives. It feels abandoned, except that it isn't at all. It's littered with your family's stuff. Katie's met with a familiar in a totally unfamiliar environment. The mechanics of the game also contribute to this effect. One of the few things that the game allows you to do as the player is pick up and examine some of the objects lying around. When you interact with the more familiar objects, you gain some insight into Katie's memories. Other objects prompt voiceovers from Sam's journal or even contain things that Katie presumably didn't know about her parents and their relationship. Despite the fact that Katie has just come home, the house that she has returned to doesn't feel like home at all, but rather like a monster, making up secrets and trauma. But again, this is a horror game without any monster. Nicole Carpenter for Polygon calls it a personal kind of horror about the life of a queer teenager and a family that doesn't understand her. Don't worry, we'll get more into the queer teenager and all the other fun queer stuff about this game soon. Another important thing to note about the design of this game is the map. According to Charlie Hall for Polygon, the house in Gone Home has a hub-and-spoke design intended to gate off certain areas of the map while providing players the illusion of being open and familiar, which makes the Greenbriers' home an impossible space, with rooms in weird positions relative to one another and even entire floors floating unsupported. This non-linear impossible space reinforces our disorientation as the eldest Greenbrier, Katie. But not only does it do that, it also brings us to our next topic, Gone Home as a queer video game. Now, I know what you're thinking. Of course it's queer, Sam is a lesbian. But just hear me out, there's so much more to it than that. Back to the map. So, as I've just mentioned, the map doesn't really make any sense. This big old Victorian house is confusing and hard to navigate, but not for Sam. During our exploration of the house, we come across little maps that Sam has made that include secret rooms and passageways. By the end of the game, it's clear that not only does Sam understand the house, she's totally mastered it and made the space her own. In a special issue of Game Studies Journal on Queerness in Video Games, Bonnie Ruberg and Amanda Phillips write, Queer theory has long been invested in understanding how queerness challenges the heteronormative ways of thinking that structure society, such as by disrupting accepted notions of time, space, and feeling. To be queer is to exist differently, to bump up against these norms, and to reshape or destroy them in moments of friction. The fact that Sam has mastered this impossible space and created secret hideaways speaks to her experience as a queer person navigating an impossible heteronormative world. In making you, the player, experience space in this way, the game exposes you to one part of what it's like to live as a queer person, to be oriented along a less accepted line, refusing to orient oneself towards something more acceptable, and resisting the interpolations of a heteronormative society. Sam, in existing differently, has a tense relationship with her parents who don't believe that she's attracted to women. With this, I make the argument that in leaving home after her conflict with her parents, Sam has reshaped the spatial order of the house, and it is this new, disorienting spatiality that we experience as the player. These aspects of queerness and resistance are also written into the narrative in more subtle ways than the discovery of Sam's identity. One thing that felt strange to me all the while I was playing the game was the fact that Lonnie, whom Sam is in Lesbians with,
I'm in Lesbians with you. What?
is in the ROTC and really enjoys it. My immediate thought was that surely the military and queerness don't really mix.
I don't get Lonnie sometimes. Like, her band, and our zine, and her hair, and everything are all anti-authority. But I watch her in JROTC, and she's doing drills in perfect formation, following orders, no question. And there's all this stuff in the news about don't ask, don't tell. Like, she's going to join the army and then have to lie about who she is. She said they don't need to know what they don't need to know. Like it was no big deal. This from the girl who trashed her locker to, like, defend my honor. I've learned when to stop arguing, though. I don't think Lonnie even gets Lonnie sometimes.
But come the end of the game, it's revealed that Lonnie doesn't end up joining the military at all. Instead, she opts to call Sam and asks her to run away with her, which, of course, Sam does. Lonnie's final decision not to go through with her military recruitment in order to spend more time with Sam is a message about resistance and what could be. In the book, What's Queer About Queer Studies, written by David L. Eng, Judith Halberstam, and Jose Esteban Munoz, it is stated that considerations of empire, race, migration, geography, subaltern communities, activism, and class are central to the continuing critique of queerness, sexuality, sexual subcultures, desire, and recognition. The work prompts us to reevaluate the utility of queer as an engaged mode of critical inquiry, and I think that by including this detail of Lonnie's journey, Gone Home is allowing us the space to do just that. Lonnie's decision may seem rash or like an unnecessary addition to the story, but in reality it makes us think about the implications of prioritizing love over war. If we consider the popularity of first-person shooter games over time, we find that there was a surge in popularity in the early 2010s with the rise of battle royale games. For a game like Gone Home to come out at this time, one might have expected it to just flop. Instead, the Fulbright Company's resistance to the popularity of violence opened up new and exciting avenues for the popular game industry. From this, we see that not only is queerness represented in the game through Sam, but it is also built into the game's play and narrative in subtler ways. Gone Home is also known for the fact that, when it first came out in 2013, it sparked controversy over the very notion of its being considered a game at all. It was deemed a walking sim by many for its slow pace, lack of combat options, and general lack of traditional gameplay. Being a first-person story exploration game without fighting elements, namely shooting, Gone Home ruffled lots of feathers. But it also gained rapid popularity and contributed to the shifting tides of video game development, play, and culture. The game developers at Fulbright at the time took a chance by focusing on narrative, and not just with words, but with object interactions and nonlinear storytelling. This dedication to telling a story, and a queer one at that, opened the door to all kinds of possibilities that weren't even thought of at the time of the game's release. Art games, queer games, and various other games with narratives told from a non-traditional perspective were gaining critical attention that these types of games would never have seen before the release of Gone Home. Gone Home also contributed to the redefining of game genres by defying any traditional definitions of genres like horror and first-person shooter. With many of the aspects of horror and exploration games, Gone Home makes us reconsider how these genres are defined and expand popular notions of genre. It belongs to these categories without fitting neatly within the box of horror, adventure, or even game. Resistance, which is central to queer studies, is seen in the game as well as built into its very concept and mechanics. Even with all that the game leaves us wanting, we have to give it credit for opening our eyes to these wants as real possibilities for future games. Alright y'all, that concludes my video essay on Gone Home. I hope you enjoyed, and maybe you learned something new. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I want to give a shout out to my peeps, Patrick, Ashlyn, and Yao. Until next time.